Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 271 of CryptoBiography, and I'm calling it You Never Forget Your First Colonoscopy. So this week, I had my first colonoscopy. That is indeed why it is titled that. It was a very interesting experience, and it's also why I wasn't really able to get enough writing done for my, the fiction story that we're working on, which is The Smallest Magician. So instead, I thought I'd talk about this because this is something that I do sometimes on this podcast. Of course, it started out as a strictly biographical and sometimes autobiographical podcast. Either talking with someone about their lives or talking about my own life. But we've been doing the fiction thing for quite a while now. I still occasionally do go back and talk about personal things as well, especially when it happens to disrupt things enough that my fiction writing is not, ready, not on par, not good to go. So I turned 52 years ago. In fact, I'm going to have my birthday here in just a couple 52nd birthday in a couple of days. And normally I'm the kind who would probably, I might put it off a tiny bit, but basically I would have probably had the colonoscopy sometime within my 50th year, because that's kind of what you're supposed to do. But COVID happened, so yeah. I didn't, do I think a lot of people basically just sort of skipped as much of the health stuff as they could given the circumstances. And this was part of it. So I didn't really see my regular doctor for a little while until I had my vaccine. So I'm all, it's all set right now and I feel very comfortable there now. It's all good. The clinic I have and the doctor I have are, very professional and, science-based, evidence-based medicine. It's all good stuff. And he did, my primary care physician did recommend that I have the colonoscopy. It's time, basically. And so I'll kind of walk you through it, because it's one of those things that you hear a lot of horror stories about. And of course, it's a very uncomfortable thought for a lot of people, simply because it deals with that part of the body, with the butt, and it's butt stuff, basically. So it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about. So I'm going to talk about it today and just sort of have my, completely I am not a doctor in any sense of the word. I have no particular expertise, but I have gone through the procedure now, and I'm going to just talk about it from that point of view. So what ended up happening was I got referred to a clinic. They first set up a little talk, they talked with me over the phone. Part of this, I think, was COVID, and part of this, I think, it's probably something they were doing anyway, but I think COVID sort of exacerbated the need for them to sort of talk ahead and find out why you're having it and what you're, do you have any symptoms and all that sort of thing. They ask about various sorts of other things that might require them to either change the procedure or do a different procedure or whatever. That call went very straightforwardly, and basically they said, yeah, we'll just have you do the colonoscopy here. We're going to set it up. Interestingly, they set me a day, but not a time. And what they did is they said that, a couple days ahead, that is when they would actually call with the specific time. I don't know. That's just apparently part of their, I think that's just a clinical thing, because the other colonoscopy, I talked with someone in my family who had a colonoscopy, and I'm not going to do any details on that person's information here because I don't want to, because it's not proper, but just to generally speak about it, I think that person was given a specific time as well as a date. So I think this is sort of just a procedure for this particular clinic. The clinic it was basically like a mostly colonoscopy, and it sounded like that's mostly what they do at this little part of the clinic. And so I guess they probably, have to figure out things to keep things efficient, I guess, and then they give you a time. So they also gave me a bunch of information. They mailed it to me. I read it. I had to go and get what's called a prep kit from the pharmacy, and the prep is a big part of the process, at least from the patient's point of view. And it has that's another thing you hear some horror stories about, because you hear these horror stories about the prep, and it tastes awful. People have to hold their nose. People have to. Some people gag on the flavor and so on. Maybe that kind of prep is still around, but the other person who had the colonoscopy and I had two different types of prep, and neither of us had a kind that was like that. Neither of us had to hold our noses. The other person had a sort of prep where you just drink water and you take a bunch of pills, which is interesting. And the kind I had was 2 little bottles. You do it in 2 phases. And so the night before, at 7 p.m., I took the first part of the prep, and it was liquid, but I think it was basically the same ingredients as the pills that the other person had. But instead it was already in liquid form, and then you add more liquid to it to dilute it to the proper amount. And it was pretty good size. I think it was 16 fluid ounces. But then after you drink that, you're supposed to drink 32 more ounces of just straight water. So it's a fair bit of liquid intake. Before you get to that, though, leading up to the prep, and again, this is a little different with the other person, but I'll just do my version. A couple days ahead of the actual prep drink that you're going to have that's going to clean you out, and it does clean you out. You start on a low fiber diet. You're basically not allowed to have anything that has large amounts of fiber in it. So, nuts and seeds are completely out. You have to cut out brown rice, whole wheat bread, a lot of other things too, certain types of fruits and vegetables. You just basically follow the guidelines they have. So I was very careful about that, and I followed their guidelines, very, very cautiously. Fortunately, you can still have white bread. I ended up getting potato bread because it doesn't feel quite so unhealthy, but it still has the required low fiber. And I had a fair bit of chicken. I basically bought a rotisserie chicken and ate several meals of that over the couple of days that I needed to do this low fiber diet, because I wanted to have something that was a little, because other than that it was fruit, which is fine, but it gets very tiring to just eat fruit all the time. Like I said, had a couple of sandwiches and stuff based on that. We made tuna one time, stuff like that. Anyway, you go on this low fiber diet. And even the sandwiches were kind of boring, because usually I would put pickles on them or relish or something, and you can't do that. And yeah, so it was just the tuna sandwich was basically tuna, mayonnaise, some Tabasco sauce for interest, and bread. So it was pretty basic, but it tasted all right. Anyway, so after a couple of days of this low fiber diet, the night before the night before the prep was going to happen, so a day ahead essentially, you take laxatives, which basically means and it worked. Not to get into too gory of a detail, but yeah, even without the prep, I was, the laxatives, they're called stool softeners, and they soften those stools right up. Yeah, so that was already sort of interesting. Then what happens is you start on a liquid diet, and then you do the prep. So you're basically at this point, the day of the prep, I'm doing the prep in the evening at 7 p.m. But starting that morning, I was allowed, if I did it early enough, I was allowed to have one last sort of low fiber but actual solid meal. So I did that. And then after that, it's just clear liquids. So it can be water, it can be certain juices, it can be broth, and not a whole lot else. There's not a lot of other options. I think you were allowed to have clear sodas and stuff like that, but I didn't have any. I didn't bother with that. I just had juice, a fair bit of water, and I sipped on some beef broth, which got very boring. So I take the prep, and so basically it's a little bottle about, I think it filled up the 16 ounce about a third of the way, so we'll call it 5 ounces or something like that. 5-ounce bottle, and then filled it up with water to dilute it properly. And I drank it. And unfortunately, I think the pill version that the other person had would have been nicer, because it's just, as long as you can swallow pills, then you're good to go. They were pretty big pills, and there was a lot of them, because what's happening is they're basically giving a bunch of different pretty basic chemicals that just tell your body, hey, we got to get rid of this. Let's go. And just, some people apparently throw up from it, but not very many. It certainly didn't give either the other person or myself any sort of digestive issues in that sense. But it would have been nice to have the pill version. I had the liquid version, but like I said, it was not gross smelling. It did not like make me gag. I didn't have to hold my nose. It actually smelled pretty neutral. And then there was sort of a bit of a, I think they added like a grape medicine flavor to it. It wasn't very strong either, but it was kind of there, which wasn't bad. I suppose if you had a bad association with like purple grape medicines from maybe when you were a kid, like I know some people have actually, and then maybe that would have been really nasty, but for me it was fine. And it had a very sort of weird chalky texture. It was a little salty as well. They add salt to it because they know that this process is going to force your body to get rid of a lot of stuff, and you need to have salt replacement, or else you could get in real trouble. Because basically, like, and I kind of kept some Gatorade on hand in case I felt like I needed more electrolytes, but it was kind of odd. There was so much salt and other electrolytes in this liquid, in this prep drink, that I never felt the need for it. I just drank a lot of water after that prep. I just drank water. It was kind of funny because like occasionally I felt the need for like food in a weird way. Like I get a little hunger pang, and then I would kind of almost like start to make a move, like I was going to get up and go to the kitchen, and then it's like, yeah, no, can't do that. So drank all the water, fine. The drink, because it was very chalky texture, and also because I understood that you're not supposed to just like gulp it down, because I could definitely, like, if I needed to, I could just kind of ignore the taste, chug it down, and be done with it. But I understood they weren't very specific in the directions on the little medicine packet, but I had kind of understood from things I'd heard from the clinic on the phone and stuff like that you're supposed to take a little bit of time to drink it. I think that's to give your stomach a little more leeway, so you don't, hopefully it lowers the chance of you getting sick on it. I don't think I would have gotten sick on it anyway. Anyway, I got it all down. That took like more than half an hour, because if you are sipping it and taking drink by drink, like, and it's this really chalky, sort of weird textured thing, it's not a lot of fun to drink. But on the other hand, like I said, it was not gross. It was not hold your nose nasty or anything like that, and it certainly didn't upset my stomach. Then I had just had another hour where I was supposed to drink the rest of the water, did that, and then the fun happened. So yeah, basically it clears out your system, and it really does do a good job of it. I don't want to get too nasty about it, but the whole idea is that there's essentially nothing in your digestive tract when they put the scope up there to camera to look around, because anything that is there is just getting potentially in the way of something that could be important for them to see, whether it's cancer or polyps, or there's a bunch of, I guess there's diverticulitis, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen, of course. So that happened, and that was a lot of fun. So what happened, so that was like 7 p.m., like I said, and it definitely took like multiple hours. It took a little bit of time for it to start really hitting, and then I was running to the restroom a lot. And there was sort of a period when, like, every so often, every few minutes, I'd have to just go back to the bathroom. It wasn't, you also hear horror stories where it's like, oh, and, it's like, I couldn't control it, no, there's still a little bit of control there, and, there's a little bit of warning. As long as you're not silly enough to, like, go take a walk or be out, be far away from your toilet, I think you're going to be fine. So yeah, so that sort of became a process, and it kind of kept happening, and then it got a little less and a little less, and then I was, of course, getting also very tired because, like, this process does take a little bit out of you. The weird diet and then just having this prep thing going through you is kind of tiring. So I'm usually kind of a night owl, and I go to sleep normally after midnight. But this time I was hoping to go to bed a little earlier because I knew that my second part of my prep was going to be happening at like 3:30, and it was because, like, you have to get it done. Because as it turns out, when they called me, I had a relatively early appointment. It was arrival at 8:40, and you have to finish your prep. It had to satisfy two things. First of all, it had to be enough after the first part of the prep that that you're not messing things up that way, but also it has to be enough before the prep that it's completely done its job and it's not going to cause problems in the operating room. Like, it has to be basically you have to be completely empty by then. And so you're not even allowed to drink water in the last couple hours before you arrive. So from 6 a.m. on, I just didn't have any water either. For a while, that was fine. Like, at 6, I was like, okay, well, I drank a little water right before then just because it's like I knew I wasn't going to be able to later. But I didn't really feel the need to. But when I got to the appointment, my mouth was a little cottony. But there was nothing to be done. You can't drink any water at that point. Not good. So that's what I did. I finished the prep, had a few hours of all kinds of fun, got cleaned out pretty reasonably well. Even just with the first part of the prep, I was like, okay, well, we'll do the second part, but I'm already it's getting pretty good here. But anyway, so yeah, I set an alarm. I went to bed kind of as early as I could, which is I think a little after 11. Alarm went off at like whatever it was, 3:30 or so. So I got like 4 hours of sleep. Not great, but at least it was something. Unfortunately, I was right. Like, I had the little episodes where I was having to run to the restroom were like getting a little further and further apart. By the time 11 o'clock hit, there was like one last one, and I hoped that would be it, and I wouldn't have to get up in the middle of the night before my 3 o'clock alarm. And I did, and that was fine. And I actually got to sleep until my alarm went off, and I had to do the second part of the prep. Second part of the prep happened, and the fun happens again, a little faster and a little faster than before even, and it was lots of fun. So running the restroom a lot, drinking the water, and I drank water afterward too, because it's like you can kind of tell your body's going through it. And then I had to get up at like 7, and it was about 6, and I did manage to get like another hour's sleep. So once again, I sort of got lucky. It felt like, okay, that felt pretty much like maybe the end of it or ish. And I did manage to get another hour's sleep. And I did have, and I got up. There was a little bit left over in the morning, but basically I was done. So had a little water, like I said, right before I went to sleep at 6, had an hour's of sleep. But then I couldn't drink after that, even if I wanted to. And eventually I did want to. So we go to the clinic, and the funny thing is, like, the prep part is kind of difficult in a weird way because it forces you to, like, change your diet up for a few days, and then you have this nasty prep and all this sort of thing. But once you get there, it's relatively straightforward. They talk to you a little bit. They kind of let you know what's going to happen. They have you stripped down. You put on one of those little gowns with the back open. I was allowed to keep my socks on, which is good, because if I have my socks on, I feel a lot warmer. I'm just that way. It's like, as soon as I take my socks off, I start to feel colder. So I was glad that I was able to keep my socks on. And basically, they just kind of let you know what's going to happen. They put a little IV in you, a little drip, and then they have the little gates where they can put in other things, and that's exactly what they do later on. So it's a little saline drip, just partly just make sure that that the drip is ready to go and that it's working, but also it kind of helps rehydrate you because they're aware that you're going to want to. Most people do want to have water by now, but you you're an adult. You're good about it, and nothing happens. Nothing happens bad. So anyway, I'm now basically naked on the table, except for the gown. They do put a blanket over you, or they ask you if you want one. I definitely wanted one, and I had my socks, and that was it. They do some more talking, kind of let you know what's going to happen. They do have to put you under for this procedure. You can't, they can't just numb the area or whatever. They need to put you under, but it's not deep sleep, so they don't have to intubate you. They just put a little oxygen, like a little oxygen nose thing, where it's like two little pipes that barely go up your nose. Like, they're only a ½ inch long or something like that. And they're just putting oxygen into your nose. But they're not putting you in deep sleep. They're putting in what they call twilight sleep. And they explained that every few minutes it just has to be redone. And which is really short, but on the other hand, that means, they're keeping close eye on how you're doing, and then, they just reapply it as needed. But that way you don't have to go in the deep sleep, because if you're in the deep sleep, you have to be intubated, and it's like the whole thing, as I understand it. They didn't actually mention that part, but I kind of learned about it from other places. So anyway, that's why they usually do the twilight sleep for colonoscopies. It's the same, and then the same table, they actually wheel me out. They wheeled me down the hall to another room, which was a very weird feeling. I've never been in a hospital for like a real surgery or anything like that before. So I've never been on a table and then get wheeled around before. It felt very odd. It felt like out of a movie, because you see that sort of thing in the movie a lot. And yeah, so anyway, the same table that you got naked on earlier is the one that they're going to roll you into the procedure room on. So basically, yeah, and in the procedure room, that's where they put in the little poop pipes up my nose, started the oxygen, let me know about the twilight sleep thing, had me roll over on my side, and then I just don't remember anything, because one of the things that happens is one of the medicines they give you, basically it blocks memory. So at some point, I sort of have really strong memories of the woman talking to me about what was going to happen, and the twilight sleep bit and all that. And then at some point, like, how you always see in movies, and then they say count down from 10 to 1, and 10, 9, 8, and then they're asleep. I don't know if that happened or not. It's possible that they did do something like that. It's even, I don't know if it's possible, probable, or what, but I have no memory of it. So if they did have me count down or do anything else to sort of like let them know that I was falling asleep, there's a memory blocking medicine, and I have no idea if they did that or not. Next thing I know, I'm back. I'm still on the same table, but the table has been moved back to the exact same spot it was before, in sort of this open room with like all these curtains around. This is where I originally got on the table and got the blanket over me and all that. And there's no tubes in me. The IV, I think, is already out. Can't remember if the IV is out or not. And that was that. I mean, like I said, from a patient's point of view, the prep is the annoying and difficult part, and having the colonoscopy is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You just do what you need to do by mostly being there, and I mean, I guess if someone was freaking out or something, that might be an issue. But it just happens and you're done. So, and then the results happen. So the interesting thing is, because, of the computers that they use, and it's digital technology, it's digital cameras at work and all that sort of thing, they can tell you immediately what happened, but also they can even show you. And unfortunately, I had a lot of issues. Nothing too bad, like they didn't find actual cancer or anything, but polyps are, an issue, and polyps sometimes do turn into cancer, so they have to remove them. I found out, like I asked around to a couple people who've had colonoscopies, like one person had 0, one person had one small one that got removed, Another person had one or two, and I don't think they were any big deal either. I had 6, and 2 of them were very big, so that was very worrying. One of them was 3 centimeters across, which is like golf ball sized, roughly. It looked pretty big in the picture too. I'm amazed that they can actually remove that, but they did. They saw that thing out of there, and then they cauterize it, as I understand it, but they didn't actually mention that. But yeah, they removed all 6 of them, and then they have to go to like a lab to be examined. And I don't have those results yet. The main thing I know is that these were genuine polyps, they weren't cancer. When there's that many and they're that big, it changes some things. Because like I said, 2 of them were big. 3 centimeters is really big. There was another one that was like, he didn't specify a size for that one, but I got the idea it was like pretty big but not as big, so maybe 2 centimeters or something like that. And the picture, I'm also basing that based on the pictures I was shown, because there was a picture of that one as well. There's a picture of all 6 of them actually, but yeah, 2 of them were really big. There's a couple of like bigger ones than the one I saw the other picture of from someone else's colonoscopy, and then like a couple of really small ones. So that sort of changes things, unfortunately, because usually if you're really lucky and you have a very clean colonoscopy, you don't have to come back for a decade. That's standard of care right now. If you find like 1 or 2 small ones and it's no big deal, then you have like a 7-year period of time before you have to come back. And that's pretty common as well. So 7 to 10 years, pretty good. You don't have to have another one for 7 to 10 years. I'm going to have another one in either 6 months or up to 3 years. So I might have to do this like shortly after the next Super Bowl. Like we might be having the next Super Bowl and I'm going to have my second colonoscopy. That's actually a possibility. It depends on what they come back with. And like I said, that's on the worst side, but even the good side is 3 years out, which is instead of 7 or 10. So we're looking at having another one again pretty soon. And like I said, I asked around in my family a little bit, and they didn't have very many polyps. They didn't have any issues. I'm just unlucky that way. So hopefully this will continue to be not too bad of an issue, and they will not find anything too bad in the polyps. We will find out. I don't know what will happen from there, but we'll keep an eye on it. I'm not necessarily planning on doing a follow-up episode to this unless it turns out to be like something actually interesting or unusual or dangerous. Then I might have to do an episode about that just to talk about it and sort of have get my head on straight about it. But thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2022 CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.